And today we get to look at an old example of one of the most nefarious weapons in history. And we'll talk about its history and evolution while looking at this practically ancient specimen. The appraiser dated this to as early as the 16th century. So from fairly early on in the development of these, as you'll see once we get to the timeline. But a stiletto, it's a purpose-built weapon, but it has a very narrow, no pun intended, use case. Needle-like blade, obviously thrusting only, not a lot of reach. This is not something you'd want to go to war with, right? It's a small, discreet, nasty little weapon. It's almost like a fancy version of a prison shank. And from a martial arts perspective, that's how it'd be used. You're looking to stab vital spots, probably repeatedly within a short period of time. The sewing machine technique. They are basically miniature pig stickers. I happen to be holding it in a reverse grip, but you could use a standard grip. Quarter saber grip would be good, I think. Now let's talk about how this kind of thing came to be. Quote, in medieval times, the stiletto was one of the favored weapons for delivering a death blow to a wounded knight. End quote. Now, does the one I hold in this video look like it'd be useful for that? I mean, it would work, but would you take it into battle against armored opponents, even to finish off a wounded one? No, it's a tiny little needle point, right? So you can see the one pictured here. Yeah, that makes sense. A very narrow but sturdy blade. And you can see how the classic design we're looking at this moment is suited to that purpose and that purpose only, really. All kinds of other daggers are much better suited to multiple scenarios, where this one was really built for just one. And the history is not as simple as that quotation implies. Quote, first developed in Italy, the stiletto dates from the late 15th century and is thought to be a development of the rondel dagger or misericordia, a needle-pointed weapon with a narrow blade designed primarily for thrusting, though possessing cutting edges, end quote. Here is a rondel dagger, and you'll know one of these whenever you see one, because they pretty much always look like this. These were one of the main dagger types in medieval Europe. Notice how much more of a handle there is here, just in terms of like diameter to grip, and how much more hand protection there is as well. This design is clearly not meant for just finishing off an already helpless opponent. But the way that it's all about the thrust is why you could see the stiletto emerging from that design. Meanwhile, the misericordia, sorry, that's Spanish, it's a French word, miséricorde, something like that. Anyway, that seems to me to be the stronger candidate, but of course there could be overlap in the development. Say for sure is that at some point in the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance, people started carrying items like this around in daily life. Like here. Here's a famous painting by Caravaggio, the card sharps, not sharks, sharps, and we see these two rogues on the right working on the mark who's on the left during a card game, and we can see that the man on the right is cheating based on signals from his buddy, the guy in the middle. And what's most important to us is that the man on the right has a dagger on his left hip, which to me looks like a stiletto. Very early on then, once the street adoption happened, the nefarious reputation started. This is an item associated with criminals. The needle-like point was thought to be such an offensive thing that it's almost kind of odd, because any dagger can be used, in a dastardly way, right? I think there's just something about the non-utilitarian aspect. It's not a multi-use tool. You can't use it to cut up your dinner, but also to defend yourself. The handle, the wood, is described as fruit wood, which basically means wood from a fruit-bearing tree. We don't know what kind. And you can see where that wood allows for a better grip than some of the models that we saw earlier in the video, right? A little bit meatier, a little bit more for you to grab onto and hold onto. And speaking of that, check out the specimen on the left. Same idea right behind the design, but obviously a much higher end model. And items like these and the next few you're going to see definitely indicate that these did not just remain a kind of a alley backstabber's weapon. When you're paying someone to make you something like either of these, or this, or the next three we're going to see, you want people to actually see that on you, right? You want to show it off. So they obviously graduated from their humble roots to becoming a prestige item, at least with some people. And by the way, I hadn't mentioned yet that our stiletto is from Germany. Like I said, possibly as early as the 16th century. It's 11.5 inches long with a 7-inch blade. Look at that thing, definitely a vicious little tool. One last thing is we really can't even use the word stiletto without thinking about the connotation it eventually took on and the weapon it came to famously denote, as seen here in these search results. It's interesting though that the weapon changed in terms of what people associate with the name, but the bad reputation stayed intact. Of course, what you actually see in movie scenes like this is an automatic knife, an Italian switchblade, but it's that modern stiletto outline that everybody recognizes. Let's finish off with two more views of our antique. Here's the pommel, obviously. You can see the dent. Yeah, I think this thing was carried quite a bit. It has plenty of wear and tear from tip to tip. And a close-up of that aged, kind of chiseled metal. Stilettos, they are definitely not the biggest or the baddest weapon on the block, but they have always fascinated people and continue to do so. Easy to conceal, easy to carry, simple, direct, and effective. Got a lot going for it. Thanks.